How's it going? Welcome back to the channel. And after a little bit of a break due to my kids being home and not giving me a lot of free time for the past couple of weeks, I am going to jump right back into talking about my Ogre project. I painted this army over the course of 2021, finishing it just up in the past couple of weeks. But originally I was going to show one big army shot video in one go, but I've decided that instead of that, because that would be a very long video if I decided to talk about any of the units in any detail, I thought I would just do it by selection. So I will start with, in this case, the characters, HQ, or whatever you want to call them, the lords and the heroes. So I've been playing a lot of 40k lately, so I've got like things like HQ in my head again for the first time in a long time, but besides the point. So yeah, these here are the 5 characters I painted. I have a Tyrant and a Bruiser. The Tyrant is pewter and the Bruiser is the plastic Age of Sigmar model. There's a Hunter and 2 Butchers or Slaughter Masters, depending on which slot I put them in. Other than one of the Butchers and again that Bruiser, these are all pewter models, or three of them are pewter models. And just going around really quick, go a little bit slower. There's a little family shot of them all. And I'm going to start now just by looking at specific ones and just going over them and kind of the thoughts I have on the model itself. Not my paint job as much. You know, I can tell you whether or not I liked painting it or whether I think it turned out okay. But really what I want to talk about is the actual models themselves and how they were to paint and put together, all that. So this first guy here, this my Tyrant, actually I'm going to bring him up closer even just so you can get a better look at him. This guy here is, as I said, pewter, and I had a lot of fun painting him. He turned out really well in my opinion, but obviously everybody has their own preferred styles. With this guy, I decided to, because he is a character, you know, go for the extra details, and I'll let you guys be the judge of how well I did. But also, with the theme I went with, I wanted my ogres to look bloody, and I wanted them to look unkept. These guys are dirty ogres that have been on the march. I call them the feast migration. Basically, the story I've given them is that they are marching through ogre lands and into, you know, Badlands and the Dwarven Mountains, lands of men, wherever it takes them to find their next meal. And what they're doing is they're honoring their god, the Great Maw, by eating the entire way, and the goal that they have is to never stop eating. So I didn't bother painting up any Noblars yet, but I'm working on how to make them work the best I can for what my image is. And essentially, before I get back to the Tyrant himself, I just want to cover this. The idea is that they're dragging, you know, what they can't eat in one sitting is following behind them as prisoners. And so I want to make Noblars that are like pulling a lot of like prisoners with them. So I'm figuring out how to do that properly. I'm looking at what model alternatives and options I have out there before I start getting into like serious conversion. So it's not just, you know, a bunch of guys that I cut their weapons off and somehow make it look like they're prisoners. But I'd rather try to find something. That's a later project though. Yeah, so the Tyrant. As a pewter model, as always with bigger pewter models, I find they're a pain to build. So this guy required a fair amount of pinning. He's pinned at the wrists. His gut plate is pinned on, and in his head. I don't think anything else had to be pinned. I don't think his arms came off. So as you can see, for the most part, he went together pretty clean. And the only thing I had to do besides pinning, something I like to use is any sort of instant curing UV resin. There's different ones out there. I can't think offhand the name of the brand I was using for all of these, but it's definitely super helpful to have. It does react strangely with super glue, and I do find you put it on with the super glue towards the edges, but it does mix, and it again gets a weird reaction, but not a bad one. I've never noticed a fume or anything. It's just it almost like crystallizes as you're going, but because you're hitting it with UV light very quickly, it gives you a strong initial bond just to hold everything in place, and then you can set the pewter model aside for a day or better 2 or 3, just to be sure all the super glue on the inner parts that it also cures. I might leave a couple of little gaps just to be sure that air can get into that. But yeah, overall, for a pewter model, this thing went together fairly easily once I did the prep work of getting the pinning done. It's a very cool model. He comes with 2 options like you saw in the unboxing. I went with this guy because I like the idea of a tyrant with a giant mace, great hammer that he's just ready to smash through ranks and walls and anything that gets in his way. And yeah, this guy just he's basically a model I wanted when I was a kid, and I don't think I would have even been able to get him put together properly, if I'm being honest. I just didn't have the talent with the pewter back then. If it wasn't a monopose or maybe just attaching an arm, it was pretty much beyond my skill level back then. So glad that it's a model I waited for and I was able to do it properly. I'm going to take him aside now, and I'm going to bring out my bruiser. The bruiser, he is, well, like as I said when I talked about that Ogre box set they put out last Christmas, this is a great model that shows that Games Workshop really knows how to still make old world style models, and one of the reasons I'm very excitedly hesitant but optimistic about the upcoming old world game. Even if the rules are not good, I do think we have really nice models on the way. They keep putting out stuff that just shows that they still understand that there are certain design elements that make up an old world model, and that this guy here is a great example of bringing that into a modern design setting. This really fits the Age of Sigmar line just as well as any of the more outlandish things that older players, older gamers often seem to not like, but he covers it really well. So I'm going to try to center him so I can give a nice spinaroo. I went with as many colors as I could on these, but also muted. Just because I don't want them to be outlandishly colored, but I did like the bright blues and, the more darker greens, earthy greens. It was kind of something I used a lot of. Red was a good tie-in color just for popping across the different models. And because it went with their bloody theme, that eventually, a lot of this stuff maybe didn't start red, but it's just been stained over time. And this guy here, I really enjoyed painting him. I thought, besides the fact he was easy to put together, which is always a blessing when it comes to Games Workshop's models. A lot of companies, just as great as they are, put out models that are just not as fun to build as a good, solid Games Workshop piece. Bring him a little closer, tilt him so you can get a look. But yeah, again, it's a great model. There's a lot of details on here, but not so much that he looks overdone compared to the old stuff, which again is just really nice for that peace of mind. I think that we're going to be treated okay with this new game. That's my hope, at least. As far as models go, Games Workshop rules are what they are. You love them, you hate them. You love to hate them. They're just, they're not always the best rule writers, never were. But if they can harness at least the models and what we used to get, I think a lot of us are going to be very happy. Even if the prices are not what we were hoping for, which I don't think they will be. It's Games Workshop after all. Now, these two, the Butchers, I'm going to do them very quickly, just because they are the same model. I switched them up as much as I could. In this guy's case here, I have this head, and this guy, if I can get him, there we go. They're both focused. I went with two different heads. And I went with two very different skin tones. Now, I definitely prefer the skin tone on this side versus this side, as far as it goes for the two. But I definitely like the paint job I did on this guy better, other than his face, which I'm going to definitely go back and look at again. I'm just even just looking through this camera, I can just tell I didn't do his teeth very well. Or the other guy. Honestly, I don't like the white teeth. I'm going to go paint those silver or something. But the models themselves, they're good. I mean, they have a lot of cool details with the aprons, and the just the body pieces all over them. The only thing I don't like about this model kit is this leg. I tried to make them different. This guy here has an attempt at like a big chunk of raw warpstone, with lightning playing across it. And this guy has like a copper oxidizing one. But I'm not, again, a fan of that leg choice that they went with, because they only released the one kit. You got 3 different heads. There's one more I did not use. I think there might even be one more arm option with a different weapon. And there's a couple of little extra bits, like some Gnoblars to attach, which I didn't bother with. I don't really enjoy painting Gnoblars, and so I tend to do models I don't like in big chunks. Not too big, but like, 20, 30 models. If I don't like your sculpt, but it's a mainstay type unit, I will do as many at a time as possible. I've done as many as 40 clan rats, for example. Now, I'm not saying I don't like clan rats, I just don't like painting them. Any version. I have hundreds of clan rats I've painted over the years, and I do them as big a block as possible for the reason that I don't like painting them. And Gnoblars, I especially don't like painting. When I get to the scrap launcher, I have a lot to say about how much I hate Gnoblars. Even though they're cool little models, I just don't like painting them. And I'm not really going to actually get into like how much I hate Gnoblar models, because they are still really nice. I just, did not want to paint those Gnoblars that get attached. I have them put away, and I've been slowly tucking aside enough Trapper style Gnoblars that I don't have to go buy the pewters. They are expensive to get because people just apparently didn't buy them back in the day, or are not selling them anymore. I don't know what the problem is, but getting 8 Trappers, like the original 8 sculpts, is, it's gonna cost me close to $80 with shipping in most cases, from what I can tell. Games Workshop retro mini prices, like retro video games, if anybody's into collecting those, they've all just the prices have gone wild since the pandemic started, and those models, the ones like that, they were already expensive, so they're pretty much just they're out of my price range for what they are. I'm not paying that much for models that I don't think I'm going to use, and saying they're the best of the Gnoblars isn't saying much in my opinion, despite the fact that they're cool. They're still just Gnoblars. They're not worth, something like going on $10 a mini with shipping. Um, yeah, there's nothing much more to say about the butchers. I think the butcher slaughtermaster kit is cool, but it's got some issues. There is one general body pose, which is this arm and the body with the legs. There's no real changes there. There's little things you can change with the arm on the right side. If I turn it here, you can see the two different weapons. I think there is one more. I just can't offhand remember what it looks like. And there is one more head, as I said. But, yeah. This guy here, he's probably going to get repainted, just in general. I don't think I did a good job with him. But we'll see if I can fix them up. The shine will go away once the weather gets better and I can get outside with a matte varnish spray and just cover up the gloss paint on varnish I had. Now I'm going to bring up the last guy, the hunter. I do not have his dogs out right now. They're actually put away, and I only realized afterwards that they were put away. Actually, give me 1 second. They might even just be on this shelf right here. Maybe I'm lucky. Ooh, I got lucky. So, these guys are actually just on a shelf. They weren't put away like I thought. Now, these guys here, I think they probably go a little bit better this way. The hunter is an interesting model as far as ogre characters go because he's on a 50mm square base versus 40mm that the other ogres have. Ogres all share a 40mm base, whether they're heroes or core or special, they're all the same. Just like most armies, they all, tend to share a base size unless somebody's mounted. This guy is one of those unique cases where a foot model does have a different size base, and that's because in 6th edition he would come with these saber claws, whatever they're called, and they had to rank up as a mini unit. And because they used the cavalry base, it had to be slightly larger for him to rank up nice and neat. I think Orion had the same setup for the Wood Elves. I don't have an Orion model that I can compare it to. And I don't even think I've seen an Orion and his hounds in person in like 20 years. So it's just going from memory. I think Orion is one of the other, again, rare cases where you had a weird, different base size for a leader, in this case, because of an attached mini bodyguard. So in 8th edition, these guys are a special choice, and you can just kind of buy them one at a time or in small little groups, and they're essentially just used as a like a march blocking and chaff to redirect units by getting in their way at a certain angle so that you can get your flank charges on them, hopefully. But in 6th edition, they came together and they protected him in combat, or he could yell "sick 'em," and that was a special rule where he would launch them off into their own charge, which wouldn't go too well for them as they're just 2 models, no ranks. But if you were against the right target, a small unit of missile troops or skirmisher, something that doesn't have their own, big set of ranks to back them up, maybe one set of ranks, but counterbalanced by the fact that they tend to be weaker in combat, these guys were pretty good, so they could do that quite efficiently. You just had to pick your target right. So this guy here, as a model, I did have some trouble with the hounds as far as keeping, I believe it was this guy's head on. I just could not have good luck getting his head on. It's one of the only models that I did not pin, and I got exactly what I should have known would happen. Is very easy just removing of his head. But it's on there solid now, and I mean, if it gets dropped hard enough that his head comes off, it's probably going to chip even with the gloss on, so I'd have to strip him and redo it anyways. Which I sort of hope never happens, because the basing is a little bit of a pain to do. I'll talk about the basing style I went with for my army afterwards. And it's not hard or anything, but it's just a little bit involved, and it takes a couple of days to get a base fully done, which meant I was doing it in big groups, and it'd be a pain to have to do just one or two. So, him though, I believe this hand, his head, his gut plate, or in this case, that skull I went with. And then on the back, I'll spin him around this way instead of keep touching him. This set of spears and this crossbow, these work together as a mini bolt thrower in both editions that they had books. Well, they had a book in 7th, but it was just the 6th edition book. So, overall, went together quite well. I only had to pin a couple of things on him, specifically his hand and the gut plate. I didn't really bother with a pin on the back because it does fit really flush all that together. And I just kind of focused on making sure that all that was just on tight, and I figured it would be fine, and so far it has been. Painting wise, he was quite fun because I decided to do him different. The reason he's not covered in blood is that again, story-wise, the lore, the fluff that I've come up with for these guys, he's the vanguard. He's out ahead, and he reports back on targets for the main army to hit, and then he goes ahead and, while they're fighting, finds the next one. He's actually a mercenary. So, while he does have some blood from clubbing whatever it is he's clubbing, and his hounds they're messy, the guy himself, he's not committed to the migration feast, which is why I just decided again just to go a little bit different route with him, just for a bit of my attempt at visual storytelling of why he doesn't quite fit in. I thought about getting him, his tusks here all covered in gore. I thought I could still make him look cool that way, but I just wanted to have one model that maybe stood out. Not because of how well I painted it versus the others, but just because he was himself not quite part of the army. So, getting all these guys back on. The basing that I went with is kind of a mix of, first I did some of the GW texture paints. You can obviously just use your own homemade versions of it. It's just some paint, some grit, and some glue. Get that on there. It'll do the same thing. And I went with Astrogranite, Sterling Mud, and what is it? Mournfang Mountain. So I have 3 different ones on there. They're not all quite visible on every single piece. I tried to make them that way, but it just didn't work out fully. After that, I used some quick setting PVA from what is it called? Geek Scenics or something like that. There's a guy on YouTube, Luke, who has a channel, and I really like his scenic ready-made basing stuff, which is what's on there. And it's something that you can easily recreate. I only really bought it originally to try out the idea of a pre-mixed tub, and I don't know what the prices are anymore. It's been a long time since I bought these, and they've lasted a long time. But it was about $8, I think, for a tub of pre-mixed grout and flock and some rocks. And, you know, I could have done it cheaper, but I still would have had to buy all the stuff, which would have overall cost more than the little tub. And I just wanted to try it, which in the end, I do like this method of basing. Once you put on the really good, it's like a latex-based PVA, I think it is. I think is what he said. Anyways, it's a nice PVA. Basically, any quality PVA, I think, would be the same thing. But, yeah. You just get the PVA on where you want, and you dip this stuff into the bucket or sprinkle it on, however you do it. Let it sit for about 15-20 minutes and at most, and it's set, which is again why I like this stuff. It is a rapid curing glue. And after that, because there's grout in it, you want to set that grout. And to do that, you add water to the base. Normally, it's not something people do. They might, you know, varnish it or spray glue or something, whatever it is they use, hairspray, to make it harder and stickier, for maybe adding a bit more on top. But this stuff here, I just have some, like I have this spray bottle of watered down PVA that I have for big projects when I'm doing a lot of stuff at once that's on like larger bases, like usually terrain based stuff, just again to harden up the flock and all that. But what I do here is use a pipette to bring some of that water with the glue out and use that for my setting purpose, because between the grout and the glue in the water itself, this stuff comes out pretty solid. There's some soft spots here and there, but for the most part, it's just a very textured, very shaggy looking field. I think this one here was called Arid Wasteland. It's like Wasteland something is what he called it. And once that was all dry, I added some Valhalla Blizzard, which again is just a very thick texture paint you can make yourself. This would probably be like baking soda and PVA. I don't know how that would react. Sorry. But that's essentially what it is. I'm sure people who are, you know, in the know better than I am and make this stuff, they could tell you. And yeah, that's the reason I went with that is I want these guys to also, as I said, have a look like they're coming down out of the mountains. And that's why there's the sporadic sprinkling of snow. At this point here, the Migration Feast has not left the mountains completely. So, you know, maybe they're sort of at the edges of the Badlands. And the Border Princes and all that. I can't think off the top of my head the map. The Border Princes area is maybe where they're getting into. But the lore is not 100% set in stone like any Warhammer lore. I just did that to kind of explain to myself what I was going to do for a paint job and the basing. And if I've messed up the lore there as far as the geography and what touches what, you can let me know, because I wouldn't be surprised if I messed it up somehow. Yeah, definitely a fun group of models to paint. And this is why I broke it up. I mean, this is like a 30-minute video talking about, what, 7 models? So I didn't want to, you know, skip on giving attention to my characters especially. And not also have time to talk about even just large units of core. I'll be able to get things like the bulls done really quickly. And I might even, in some cases, just do 1 unit per section just to speed it up per video. And not have you guys here for like 30 minutes listening to me talk about, you know, unit after unit after unit, depending on how many are in that slot. So thank you very much for checking this out. And as always, any comments or questions, just leave them for me. I always do my best to check them. And if you have any suggestions for what I can do to improve my painting, I'm always open to it, as long as it's you know, it's don't be critical, but give me critique. You know, if I did something that, you know, wrong technique wise, I definitely would love to hear it. Just don't dunk on my models, you know, if you don't like them. Some people definitely haven't liked all the blood and rust I went with. Totally fair. but it's not your army, it's mine. I'm happy with it, you know, maybe not 100% as I said, but I can fix that stuff later. And I probably will in some cases. But yeah, thanks very much, and I hope you all have a great day.